Hello and welcome to the Class 6A Texas High School Football Schedule Release Show. Throughout the next hour, we're going to be talking with media members from across the Lone Star State as we show you every single schedule in Class 6A for the 2014 season. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a list of schools. That is the running order of schools that are scheduled to appear on your screen next. Now, all 32 districts are featured, and at the end of the show, we'll take a look at the preseason, regular season, and postseason schedule, as well as our pick for some notable games to watch in all 11 weeks of the regular season. As you see, the schedule to start off with in West Texas. We're going to start in West Texas with Adam Zuvanich, the Odessa American. Adam, you're basically covering 3 6A with the Little Southwest Conference. We're also going to touch a little bit on 2 6A as well. What's your overall impression when the realignment came out? Splitting the West Texas into 2 5-team districts, which is what they wanted. What was your impression of the schedules?
Well, initially, I think if you look at the quality of the teams, and it's at the 6A level, 4 teams from each district are going to qualify for the playoffs. In this case, you have a 6-team district and a 5-team district. In 3 6A, 4 of the 6 teams are going to make the playoffs. In 2 6A, 4 of the 5 are going to make the playoffs. Do all 8 of those teams, are they going to be deserving playoff teams? Probably not. You're going to have some teams in there, the 3rd and 4th place teams in each district probably aren't going to be that strong when you put them up against the teams from the, like say, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and some of the bigger city areas like that. I think the reason they did it, and the reason it makes sense, is for travel concerns. You pretty much have the Lubbock and Amarillo schools grouped together, and then as you said, you could have kind of the old Southwest Conference, Abilene High, without Abilene Cooper, and then San Angelo Central, and then the 2 Midland schools, the 2 Odessa schools. It makes sense for travel purposes, mainly beyond football. I think in the other sports, looking at baseball, basketball, things like that, where they play on weeknights, it's going to make it a little easier, a little more workable, because obviously, the West Texas is not a heavy populated area, but there's a lot of space in between all the towns. So it is a big concern for the schools out here. You can look at Odessa High, though, for example, and what Odessa High did, they had their district schedule against the Midland, San Angelo, Abilene, and then Permian. But then their non-district schedule is they're playing all 5 of the teams from 2 6A. So, Odessa High is basically playing last year's schedule, but half of it's non-district and half of it's district.
When you look at Odessa's schedule, they face Lubbock Monterey and Lubbock Coronado to start off the season, and then they get the Amarillo schools, and then you have Wolford Friendship. Talk a little bit about the Odessa schedule and how it prepares them for district play.
Well, I think definitely, obviously nothing's been played yet. We're not real sure who's going to be any good, who's not going to be any good. But historically, especially the last few years, Amarillo High and Friendship are very good programs. They would probably be very competitive. Last year, even as 4A schools, probably would have been very competitive at the 5A level. So if you look at Odessa High, the Broncos are going to start out with the Lubbock schools, Monterey and Coronado and Tascosa. Neither one of those teams are world beaters. I think it sets up well for them. They can kind of ease into things. Then you're going to see the 2 best teams from 2 6A, Amarillo High and Friendship, right before district play. So I think it sets up pretty well for the Broncos to kind of get them ready. It's kind of a gradual build up to district play before they start off with Midland High on October 10th.
And then we shift gears to Odessa Permian. An interesting view on the Permian is they have 2 valley schools, McAllen, they're playing in Converse, and then the next week Mission Memorial comes up and plays them 2 Saturday games back-to-back. And then you have the trip out west to El Paso. Talk about the Odessa Permian schedule and the travel schedule, especially in non-district play.
Right. Well, travel-wise, it's not too bad. They open against McAllen, and that's going to be at Converse Judson. Quite a long trip, but it's a neutral site. It's essentially halfway between McAllen and Odessa. So it's interesting. You don't see any historic. Permian a lot of times in a lot of years, you might have a team from out of state, from Oklahoma or Washington, that wants to come in and play the Odessa Permian Panthers. Because obviously everyone knows Mojo. They know Friday Night Lights. But you haven't seen that. Blake Felt. Last year they started 0-3. I think maybe he wants to try to avoid that this year. You don't see any of the big Metroplex schools on their non-district schedule. You said you've got 2 El Paso schools, 2 schools from the Valley, and then Lubbock, Coronado. So it's kind of no offense to those schools down south and out west, but kind of an easy non-district schedule. Almost kind of like they want to build some confidence. Get things rolling before they crank up against Midland Lee, which is a huge rivalry game to start district play.
Of course, San Angelo Central, they're in pretty much almost a no-win situation with their geography, especially out west. Do you see that as an advantage or a disadvantage for San Angelo Central being where they are, scheduling non-district play?
Well, I think they're kind of in a funny spot. No matter who they play, no matter what district they're in, and no matter who they're trying to find games against, they're going to have to travel a long ways. Being in San Angelo, there's just nothing close by. They could go to Austin, they could go to San Antonio, they could go to Abilene, maybe to Odessa. Either way, they're looking at the hike. Lubbock's the same, 3 hours to Lubbock, 2.5 hours to Odessa. So, I'm not sure. My guess is the Bobcats are probably used to it, and there's probably nothing they can do about it, and then they've probably long been resigned to that. And like I said, that's kind of the lay of the land out here, out in West Texas. Is you're going to have to travel, so you may as well just get used to it.
Yeah, of course, their non-district schedule, they have Trophy Club Nelson at AT&T Stadium, and then they have to travel to Hobbs, New Mexico the next week and play El Paso Franklin, and then they get the home game against Wilford Friendship. Those 3 games back-to-back will tell a lot to what San Angelo Central is going to be like in district play. Is that the same perception you're getting?
Well, and obviously, they shared the district title last year with Midland Lee. Those 2 teams were clearly the best 2 teams in the district, and they figure to be again this year. The question is, can they find a quarterback that can be just as productive? Mickey Scott at San Angelo Central and Caden Coots at Midland Lee. Those guys were great passing quarterbacks. Coots set the school record just in 1 year, and Mickey Scott was very talented. So, it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of reload and keep going. But you still have to consider San Angelo Central probably the favorite going into district play. I really think that game against Wilford Friendship, like you said, it's kind of a tough stretch for them. The game against Friendship, I think everyone out here should circle that on their calendars. That's Davis versus Davis. Brent Davis, the head coach at San Angelo Central. His brother, Brad Davis, is the coach at Friendship. Their dad, Bobby Davis, was the coach at Friendship for a long time. Those are 2 good programs, 2 really good coaches, and I think that's going to be a great non-district football game. I mean, that might even be the marquee. That might be the marquee game in the non-district schedules for both districts, I think.
Now, when you look at Wilford Friendship coming up to 6A, especially along with Amarillo, how much did that change the way that these teams schedule in non-district play out west?
Well, I don't know if it really would. I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone out here. I worked in Lubbock for a while, and you could kind of tell. I mean, Friendship, that part of Lubbock has been growing significantly for the past 10, 15 years. So, everyone knew they were eventually going to be in the biggest classification. It was kind of just a matter of when. And I think they've already put themselves at that level. Last year they put a pretty good whipping on the Permian Panthers, in the home game at Friendship. They've kind of already established themselves as one of the better programs in West Texas. They've already kind of, even when Coronado and Monterey were bigger schools in Lubbock, Friendship was still the best team. So I think that I'm not really sure much changes. I kind of think it's finally happened. It's kind of what everyone knew was going to happen eventually, and now it's here.
Out of all the scheduled in 2-6A and 3-6A, what are some of the games that you're looking forward to the most?
Both. Well, as I said, I think that San Angelo Central friendship game has got to be the marquee game. Abilene High versus Abilene Cooper is another one. That's a long-standing rivalry, a city rivalry, and obviously they were broken up. By being in different classifications in different districts. You got to look at that as a marquee game. I don't know a whole lot about some of the El Paso schools as far as what they've got coming back. And of course, Midland and Abilene High playing some of those Dallas area schools. Those are going to be big time games as well. I think anytime the West Texas meets up with the Metroplex, it's always interesting. The Metroplex has had the upper hand lately, obviously, but.
All right, that's Adam Zuvanich from the Odessa America. Thanks a lot, Adam. Okay, up next we have Ben Baby from the Denton Record-Chronicle. Ben, Denton Geyer and Denton Ryan, they've been rotating between 5A and 4A over the last few years, and now they're finally back into a district together. Now, with both of them in district play, what does that game mean between the two of them together now?
Man, I can tell you right now, whenever they release those schedules, and we kind of knew that Geyer was going to be moving up to 6A with Ryan. I mean, the talk around town ever since those realignment was released was everybody was looking forward to Week 10 when Geyer and Ryan would be playing. They haven't played since, I believe, 2008, when Geyer knocked Ryan out of the playoffs there in 4A, and that was, considerably one of the best games, ever played in Denton, considering that was Ryan at that point was already, established, and Geyer was kind of right on the verge of that, and that kind of put Geyer over the edge, that win against Ryan. So a lot of talk around town has been, everybody's looking forward to Week 10. Everybody's been wanting Geyer and Ryan to play for a few years now since they've been split up, like you said. And so it's a pretty neat deal for people in town that Geyer and Ryan are going to be playing each other there in that final game of the regular season.
Of course, Denton Geyer, they're playing Allen to start the season. That game's at UNT at Pogge Stadium. Talk a little bit about that game between Geyer and Allen, and what are your expectations between those two teams?
I mean, it'll be I think that game should have a great crowd coming out. That kind of reminds me of back in the early 2000s. Now, I wasn't here for it, but I've heard plenty about when Ennis and Graham Harrell came into town to play Ryan. There at the old Stouts Field where UNT played. I mean, that drew a considerable crowd. And I think Allen and Geyer has the capability to draw a crowd as UNT would draw on a pretty nondescript game. I expect Allen probably has they've got a really good squad coming off a team that won the 6A title there, and Geyer is losing a lot of key components, but it'll be a good game. Allen's O-line is very well respected around the state. It's considered one of the best in the state, and Geyer's D-line is definitely really, really solid when you got guys up front like they have. And Denton in general, the town's been known for producing some great defensive linemen. So it'll be a good matchup. I think it's a good test for Geyer. The Wildcats have always been known to take, a really good non-district challenge. Last year, they played Cedar Hill over the last couple of years, and we've seen what Cedar Hill's done, and it'll be good preparation for them going in district here. I know John Walsh has kind of he's proved himself here over the last couple of years, and I think he knows what he's doing here in scheduling Allen at the beginning of the season. So I think we all kind of win watching that game.
Of course, it doesn't get any easier for Geyer going into district play. They have Ennis, and then they have Wichita Falls Rider, who have both been proven to be very tough and very talented teams over the last few years. Your thoughts on Ennis and Wichita Falls Rider, along with Allen, back to back like that?
I think that's at that point. I think that's kind of really good for a team. And the Geyer's a young team. You're going to figure out really quickly with teams, like Ennis and like Ryder, what they're going to be made of here for the next few weeks. I know Ryder's coming off a really rough year last year. That really was very un-Ryder-like for what they've done. And they have a new head coach, and they're going to be kind of getting adjusted on the other side of that as well. And Ennis kind of hasn't been the same team that we saw in the early 2000s. So I think Geyer should be able to win. They should be able to win both of those games, but it's a really good non-district schedule. I mean, you can go and look what Ryan's done over the last couple of years. Their non-district schedule has kind of been taxing, but it hasn't been near as taxing as I think what Geyer's got on the slate this year. It should be a good challenge for Geyer, and it's a good tune-up coming into a very, very competitive district, 5-6A.
Shifting over to Denton Ryan, new coach, and you got Rockwell, Hebron, and Wiley East in non-district play.
Yeah, I mean, they're it's about time Ryan actually played 10 games. It's been a couple years. I know the last 2 years they didn't want to play. Either whatever Joey Florence, the old head coach, said, either they couldn't find anybody or they didn't want to play one of those teams out of that Allen district. That's up for debate. But they had only played 9 games for the last 2 years, so this will be the first time, in a couple of years that they've actually played a full 10-game slate. They've had that extra bye week going into district play. But I mean, they're going to have they'll have a pretty rough go. Ryan's losing over 50-some-odd seniors, and Rockwall will give them a good challenge. Hebron has beat them the last 2 years. Hebron's outplayed them easily the last 2 times they've been in district, so they're no strangers for Ryan. And Wiley East just kind of reloads year in, year out. Wiley East was kind of in a down year last year. Ryan took advantage of that, and this will also be the 3rd straight year they're playing. So, the only wild card that they haven't seen in non-district will be Rockwall. And you got to remember, Rockwall is Denton ISD AD Joey Florence's old stomping grounds. His dad is Mickey Florence, well known in that regards. Joey went to high school at Rockwall. So, it's kind of everybody's kind of familiar there in that non-district slate. And it's going to be a tough sledding for new Ryan head coach Dave Hennigan here.
When you look at district play between Ryan and Geyer, what do you see looking forward to the most out of those schedules for both of them in district play?
I mean, district play, Geyer's going to be, I think everyone's kind of picking Geyer to make a good run at the district title here, and you'll see that. I think Geyer's biggest challenge might be Keller Fossil Ridge is bringing back a lot of key players, and Northwest will also have a lot of key players here. But when we were looking at when the realignments were coming out, I think this is kind of what you were looking for. If you're a Denton ISD fan, I think this is the district you wanted. It's challenging, but it's not necessarily the hardest district you could have. I mean, you look at the teams that they were playing, like Coppell and the Flower Mound schools. They got lumped in with that district out in Fort Worth that's got Coppell, Trinity, Southlake, all in the same district. That's going to be a tough one. And then we go look in Dallas, and you see all the Plano schools and Allen and all of them in that same district. This is probably, I think, any coach in DFW in 6A wouldn't mind the district that Geyer and Ryan are in. I think Geyer should have a much better year than Ryan this year. Geyer's got a lot more talent coming back, and they've got the influx of quarterbacks there. And Ryan's just losing so many people off a very good team. And with the new head coach coming in, I mean, I think everybody at Ryan expects the Raiders to make the playoffs. But, I don't know if we should have high expectations for Ryan this year. Other than that, I think they're kind of in a rebuilding phase. They're going to try to get everybody reloaded here. So I think Geyer's got a good shot at winning the district. They'll have to fight Fossil Ridge and Northwest and the likes of that. And Ryan I think they're going to be scrapping for either that 3rd or 4th spot out of the district into the playoffs.
All right, that is Ben Baby from the Denton Record-Chronicle. Thanks a lot, Ben. Okay.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. On the Class 6A schedule release show is Steve Spiewak from Mac Prep. We're going to talk a little bit of national high school football from a 6A schedule from a national perspective. Steve, what's the perception on Class 6A schedules from a national level?
I think, unlike many states, the perception for Texas is you don't really have to travel too far to play against a very good team. There are some schedules in the state that are more challenging than others, and there are some unsuccessful teams that might look like easy games on the schedule, but by and large, I think if you're playing a Class 6A schedule in the state of Texas, you're probably going up against some very good football teams.
Of course, some of those schedules would include Eastern Christian, Dutch Fork, and Tulsa Union. Let's start off with Eastern Christian, which comes into Texas playing back-to-back against DeSoto, Hughes Trinity, and Coppell. What do you see with Eastern Christian, and tell people about what you expect from them?
Well, what I see in Eastern Christian is a very brave football program. I think that I think they are probably going to be underdogs in every game that they play in Texas. From the perspective of Trinity, DeSoto, and Coppell, there are not many teams that are willing to step up to the plate and say, "Hey, DeSoto, hey, Trinity, we'll come to you and we will play you guys on your home field." I think these teams sort of probably struggle to find willing opponents. So to have this Eastern Christian team say, "Hey, we'll come down there and play you guys, no questions asked," I think that's sort of a that's a great opportunity for the Texas schools to book a game against a program that's trying to prove itself. Eastern Christian is founded by the father of David Sills, the USC commit. They've had some struggles in the past, sort of getting accreditation to count as a legitimate opponent, but it is a distance learning school. There's not an actual school building. The children are homeschooled, and they come together and they play football. So I think for Eastern Christian, going down there and getting a single win, I think would be impressive, and I think would help sort of make them more legitimate in the eyes of those around the country, because traveling to Texas and winning a football game against the likes of Campbell, DeSoto, and Trinity is never easy. So I think they're probably underdogs in all those games, and I'd be surprised if they won one.
What kind of quarterback is David Sills, for those that have not seen his highlight film?
Well, I think he's considered more of a drop-back passer, but I know Dwayne Thomas, the head coach at Eastern Christian, just raved about his work ethic and his athleticism to sort of make himself a better athlete. Now, some of the issue with David Sills is that he had no sophomore film, so there was film on him last year, but they basically did not have a sophomore season, and I think that's where you sort of saw him nationally get overlapped by some of the other elite quarterbacks. So I think this year as a senior, I think he is really looking to have a superb senior season to remind people that, hey, I'm still in this discussion among the nation's top quarterbacks, because right now when people are talking 2015 QBs, there are a lot of names that come before his.
Of course, another team coming down, we touched on them, Dutch Fork. They're playing Allen against, of course, Allen had the issue with the stadium. Talk a little bit about Dutch Fork and what they're bringing to the table and what you expect out of them.
Well, Dutch Fork is led by head coach Tom Knotts, and he was the architect of the Independence High School dynasty that won 109 consecutive games. There he coached quarterback Chris Leak, he coached Hakeem Nicks, coached a lot of talented guys, and they will look to air the ball out. They are a progressive sort of spread offense traditionally under Coach Knotts. And I think right now, I think Dutch Fork is sort of hitting its stride as a program. I think that, they won the state title last year. They beat Burns. They beat Sumter. They had a really good season. And I think many of those key pieces are back. And so I think that, Allen is the favorite, but I think that people will be pleasantly surprised with how competitive Dutch Fork is. I think, Allen fans probably expect Allen to win somewhat easily, and they may do that. But Dutch Fork is a very good program with a coach who has a lot of experience in big games and playing out-of-state games. I saw him take Independence to Cincinnati, where their winning streak finally snapped against Elder. So I think this team will know what it's getting into. This team is experienced, it's seasoned, it's got a great coach, and I think it's going to be a good football game.
Of course, Tulsa Union also comes back to Texas to play South Lake Carroll. That game can be played at AT&T Stadium. Tulsa Union had their challenges with Jinx over the years up in Oklahoma. What do you expect out of Tulsa Union this year compared to years past?
They should be competitive. I think that right now, it sort of goes back and forth between Jenks and Union. Those two teams have a stranglehold on the Class 6A state title in Oklahoma over the last 10 years. But right now, Jenks seems to be on top. That could easily tilt in Union's favor. But Union was more competitive against DeSoto last year, I think, than in some of the games in the past. They lost 44-20. And when you think about just how high-powered DeSoto was, a 24-point loss against them is not all that much. So, it's almost a positive. Oh, you only lost to DeSoto by 24. I think they'll be competitive against Carroll, but I think Carroll is the clear favorite, and I would expect them to win by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Of course, South Lake Carroll, they have their fair share battle, and Tulsa Union played DeSoto last year. Speaking of DeSoto, they're playing Cibolo Steel in non-district play at the new stadium in Waco. What do you see? From a national side, what do you see out of that matchup?
Well, I think Cibolo Steel is sort of underrated a little bit, probably by people like me. I mean, they are such a successful program. They've had notable recruits come through their doors that they've had and then replaced. They're remarkably consistent. Right now it's hard to pick against DeSoto in any matchup. But, for fans of San Antonio area high school football, fans of Dallas high school football, any Texas high school football fans, that's a really fun game and one that I'm excited for.
And of course, you have the perception of Katy also in your national rankings. Katy's been, they're not really playing any national games but they have in the past. What's the perception of Katy and from a national side, and what do you expect out of Katy?
Well, Katy normally does not have the most challenging regular season schedule, but, historically they are 2-0 in out-of-state games. They knocked off Bellevue pretty handily, probably about 4 years ago now. Katy does its talking in the postseason. I think that, would it be fun to see Katy challenge itself in the regular season with an out-of-state game? Sure, but Katy doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Katy's one of the most successful Texas high school football programs of all time, and when the dust settles in December, they're usually playing for a state title. So from a fan perspective, yeah, it'd be great to see Katy play another team out of state, but if your goal is to win a state title, I don't think that Katy necessarily needs to do anything differently because they've had so much success.
That is Steve Spiewak from Max Prep. Thanks a lot, Steve. Now on the line with us is E.J. Holland, the associate editor from Dave Campbell's Texas Football. E.J., talk about the Class 6A landscape and what do you see out of 6A from the schedule standpoint?
Oh, I think there are a bunch of great games. 6A is filled with a lot of great teams, and, I'm looking forward to covering some games this year. I think particularly as we delve into it here, I'm sure later on in the show, Week 3 is filled with a bunch of games. I'm excited for some openers like Austin Westlake and South Lake Carroll. That game's going to be rocking because of Todd Dodge. I'm sure this is getting everybody really excited for the upcoming year.
Of course, there's a couple of those games that are worthy of note to mention. DeSoto and Cibolo Steel playing in Baylor. What's your take on that game going into playing in Baylor?
That's going to be a great game, actually, to open up McLean Stadium. We got a chance to go out there for the DCTF cover shoot and got to see the building of the stadium and how beautiful it's going to be. So it's going to be a really amazing experience for them to be able to open up that stadium before Baylor takes on SMU that Sunday. But as far as the game, I'm really excited to see DeSoto. They're a team that was, just a couple of plays away from making a state championship last year and possibly winning it. Obviously, they don't have Desmond White back at quarterback. They have Tristan Wallace coming in, but I've seen him at a couple of camps. He's an animal, and they have great wide receivers like Kevin Thomas and Akil Davis, and the defensive line anchored by Bryce English. And Cibolo Steel has a great playmaker in LG Williams at quarterback, who's just a dynamic athlete that's committed to Texas State. That's going to be a great game to look forward to. I believe it's Week 4, and it's a battle of Dallas and San Antonio. Cibolo Steel, always a great team that comes out of that area, but I think DeSoto has too much firepower for them.
When you look at the schedule, you see Allen with 10 road games in the regular season, considering that they're playing all the games on the road, and some of the games will be played at Plano, considered home games. What's your take with Allen being road warriors this year?
Well, it's a crazy situation that happened with Allen Stadium. I've been there numerous times, and it's a beautiful stadium, a beautiful facility, and it's just unfortunate that happened to them. But Allen's a powerhouse, a team that is looking to win yet another state title, and they bring back a load of talent. And I don't think playing on the road, I guess you could say, is necessarily going to affect them too much. They still have the best player in the state in Kyler Murray. They have a great offensive line led by Greg Little. in Cody Wheeler, a great wideout in Jalen Guyton. They need to worry a little bit about their defense and getting them shaped up early since they only return one starter. It's Jalen Jones, a defensive back. But, I still don't see Allen having any trouble until later in the season. They play Plano West and Plano East. Those will be two tough games, Week 10 and Week 11. But, they might challenge Allen, but, Allen's just far superior. I think Allen's just going to run the table again in district play and make another run at a state title. I don't necessarily see them having any trouble just because they're not playing in their home field.
Sticking in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Eastern Christian from Maryland coming into the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 3 straight weeks, playing DeSoto, Euless Trinity, and Campbell. We talked to Steve Spiewak earlier about that team. He fully expects all 3 Texas teams to be favored. What's your take with Eastern Christian coming to Texas?
Well, I think it's great to always get to see some different matchups, how teams match up from teams from out of state. Tulsa Union's another team that's coming down here. We've seen a bunch of teams from Oklahoma and Arkansas and Louisiana make the trip to Texas. So I think it's great just to see how this great state stacks up against some of the top teams from around the nation. Eastern Christian, they're going to have a tough time. Like you mentioned, they play 3 really solid teams. We talked about DeSoto earlier. Campbell is another team that's on the verge of doing something great. They have Charles West back in the backfield, who's pretty much unstoppable, and Euless Trinity is they're going to get them in the opener, and Euless Trinity is always tough to handle up front. They have Patrick Vahe on the offensive line and Tipa Gillet on the defensive line, and they're just always strong in the trenches, and I think that opener against Euless Trinity is going to kind of open Eastern Christian's eyes to Texas high school football and how physical and dominant a team like Euless Trinity can be up front. So, like I said, Eastern Christian's going to have a tough time, but it's always fun to see those out-of-state teams come into Texas and take on some of our best.
And speaking of tough schedules, South Grand Prairie, they're playing probably one of the toughest non-district schedules in the state. Dallas Skyline, South Oak Cliff, Arlington Martin, and Abilene Cooper. What's your take with South Grand Prairie taking on that kind of a challenge?
Yeah, you're completely right. And not only their non-district schedule, their entire schedule in general is tough. They're in District 8, which also includes DeSoto and Duncanville and Cedar Hill and Mansfield. They just have a really tough schedule in general as far as their non-district schedule. Opening up at Dallas Skyline, that's going to be a tough game. Even though Dallas Skyline has some holes to fill, they're always loaded with talent. They bring back guys like 6'6" wide receiver Carlos Strickland, who's tough to cover on the outside, and Anthony Wheeler, one of the top linebackers in the state. South Oak Cliff is loaded with FBS talent. Taking on at Arlington Martin on the road is going to be no easy feat. So, they have just a tough schedule overall. I could easily see them going 0-3 to start off the year, but South Grand Prairie also has some really good athletes. Tony Nicholson, who's an Arizona State commit, he lined up at quarterback last year, is probably going to be playing a little bit of receiver, a little bit of maybe defensive back. He's a guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything, and they also have a great receiver in Jalen Austin. So South Grand Prairie has some talent too. I say they could start off 0-3 just because of the fact that the schedule is so difficult, but they could easily go 3-0 or 2-1. This is a South Grand Prairie team that's kind of a little bit of a mystery other than those 2 playmakers, but I really do believe that South Grand Prairie that tough non-district schedule will help them out as they get into district, as they take on a DeSoto, as they take on a Cedar Hill late in the year. But, that's, like you said, that's a tough non-district schedule for anybody.
One matchup that looked very tasty, especially for Houston area fans, Galena Park North Shore playing Euless Trinity. That game is one of the ones that's been eyeballed for quite some time once the schedules came out.
Definitely. Like I mentioned, Euless Trinity has always been dominant up front. That's kind of been their mantra, you could say, is dominating the trenches. But Galena Park North Shore also has some really good players up front. Tyler Moore is an offensive lineman who's been on the rise in the recruiting ranks, and he's a guy that can maybe help control a guy like Tipagoe. And Dorrance Armstrong at defensive end is great coming off the edge, and Galena Park North Shore also brings back Tristan Houston at running back. So they have both teams have tremendous talent. It's going to be a clash of the Titans, you could say. The fact that it's in Galena Park North Shore is going to give them a little bit of an upper leg. I see this as being a kind of a low-scoring, smash-mouth game. Euless Trinity coming away with a win, but not by too much.
Tell us a little bit about the magazine and all that good stuff.
Well, Dave Campbell's Texas Football is always a special product here in this state, and we've worked really hard on this, and we think we put out a great product this year, a great cover with Art Browse and Baylor. The magazine always features previews from all 12 FBS schools. It features previews of every single public school, and this edition actually has our largest private school section ever. So, private school fans can make sure to pick that up. As far as where you can get it, you can find it at airports, you can find it at HEBs, Walmart, 7-Elevens. It's hit shelves on Friday, so it should be making its way around the state this week and into next week. And you can also purchase it online and become a Champions or Legends member, and also receive our new digital subscription package, as well as some other fun gifts. So Dave Campbell's Texas Football has always been a Texas tradition. I'm sure that everybody out there appreciates, and we hope you'll stop by one of your stores or visit our website and get yourself a copy.
All right, that is E.J. Holland, the associate editor for Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Thanks a lot, E.J. Now on the line with us is Michael Adams from the Austin American-Statesman. Michael, let's talk a little bit about the Austin Westlake and Lake Travis schedules from your perspective. Talk about the 9-team district that they're facing and how it affected their scheduling for non-district.
Well, I talked to both Lake Travis coach Hank Carter and Todd Dodge about this, and obviously the schedule was set before Dodge got there, but he kind of got excited when he saw the South Lake Carroll game for obvious reasons. But as far as Lake Travis goes, I mean, Carter pretty much pointed out that that you have 2 games, you got to go out and play some really good teams because that's who you're going to see in the playoffs. And he did it. They got Waco Midway and Cropper's Cove, and those are 2 games. They got Midway coming here on the first week of the season to Lake Travis, and they're going up to Cove the next week before they headed right into district play. Westlake's got South Lake Carroll and Temple. Big game up in Dragon Stadium the first week for Dodge and the Chaps, and I think Temple, they've played Temple for years, and it goes back and forth. So those are 2 good teams. Those are 2 playoff teams. So really, I think those are strong non-district schedules for both of them.
Of course, you mentioned that with South Lake Carroll opening up the season at home against Austin Westlake, Todd Dodge going up to South Lake for the first time since he left that job for UNT. What did Dodge say about that game, and what's the hype been around for Westlake playing South Lake Carroll?
Well, the day they introduced Dodge as the coach, they held a little press conference out at the stadium, and that was one of the first questions someone asked him, what do you think about that? And his direct quote was, I'm not going to get any sleep the night before. And I think there hasn't been much hype yet. I think closer to the season you're going to see that game all over the state, not just here in Austin, but you're going to see it in Dallas. And, it's kind of Todd Dodge's last game he coached at South Lake Carroll was against Westlake in the state championship game. I think 2006 was the year. So, that always is always a good thing, good storyline behind a game when a coach is coming back to the place where he got pretty much built his legacy and bringing his new team, which was the last team he faced. So I think it's going to be more, you're going to see a real big
level of hype on that game come closer to August.
And then the next week, the Chaparrals play Temple at home. Temple is no easy slouch for any team to play, especially with Chad President coming back for the Wildcats. How did Westlake match up with Temple?
Well, it's going to be different this year. Last year, that was probably one of the best games that Westlake played. Came back from 28 points down to win that game at Chaparral Stadium, which I guess to get them back there this year. But I think it's going to be a little bit different this year. It's going to be there's still a lot of questions surrounding this Westlake team. They don't have any offensive starters. Sean Rawlings is injured, and he's not going to be available probably till around the late end of October if he's available at all. So they're going to have a whole new offensive scheme out there, and a whole new offensive style of play. I mean, the Westlake's played the spread offense before, but they've kind of relied heavily on good passing quarterbacks, and I think right now Ellinger's going to be Sam Ellinger's going to be a starter. He's a sophomore, so I think Dodge will rely heavily on the running back Malik Jacobs, who has had one heck of a spring, and I'm sure it's going to continue over in the fall. So it's going to be an interesting thing. Defensively, I think that it'll pretty much, Temple's not going to be able to score on them as easily. I think the defense is going to be Westlake's strongest unit, hands down, with Hudson Hall and Breckenhager. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, I think.
And when you look at Westlake district schedule, they play at Austin High, and then they got the bye week, and then they play Austin Bowie the next week. Describe those two games and what do you expect out of those games with Westlake being in the situation that they're in?
Westlake's district schedule, I think, really kind of benefits them in a way. Bowie is going to be the game I think everyone wants to watch, especially around Westlake, because they have a bye week before, and it's going to be played at Westlake this year. And last year, Westlake went in the Burger Stadium here in Austin, played Bowie, and kind of really didn't wake up till the second half. Fell in a 21-point hole, and I think that's one that they want back. Austin High is always a really good game for Westlake. That's a rivalry game, so you get those two out of the way, and the only next game you really got to worry about, I think, in the final stretch of that series is Lake Travis. Lake Travis has beaten them 6 straight times, so Todd Dodge would like to come in and change that, and I think his kids at Westlake would like to go in and change that, but that's not going to be an easy task by any means.
And of course, with shift gears to Lake Travis, they opened up the season against Waco Midway. Midway has been a very talented team over the last few years, and it's going to be a tough challenge for the Cavaliers. And then the next week they play at Copper's Cove, which has been notorious for being in some very competitive games over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and those are going to be two good games to really get yourself together, because you get Hayes, which I think a lot of people are going to start overlook Hayes a little bit because they don't think they feel they can compete. But that's going to be the third or fourth place team in the district, and they're going to be decent. There's 3 games and they get an open week, so Hank Carter should have everything together by then. And then it's pretty much you play the bottom half of that district before you play Westlake. So the trick, I think, for Lake Travis is going to be getting it figured out, keeping it together through those games that they know they're going to go in. They're not going to roll over these teams, and then you get Westlake at home again this year. So, and Westlake almost beat them last year. So, and this year they don't have Sean Nixon, so they're going to have to figure something out.
Then you alluded to with the Westlake game in between. They're sandwiched in between the Austin High and Bowie game. You have those 3 games back to back to back like that. How does Hank Carter approach those games going late into district play?
Well, I think last year it kind of was a little bit similar. I mean, they opened the district with Austin High, and then they went through, I think, Del Valle, Anderson, and Aikens before they went through Bowie, Aikens, and Del Valle, or Anderson before they, finished up with Westlake. And I think he approaches it the same way every year. You're getting closer to the playoffs. The district championship will likely come down to that October 24th game at home against Westlake, and just like last year, they knew they had to beat him or they were going to get into a three-way tie. So I think Carter will approach it the same way. Hey, look, we go through Del Valle, we go through Lehman, we go through Anderson. We got to beat Austin High. We go in, we beat Westlake. Can't take the district title from us. So I think that's how he will approach it. And he seems to always have a plan up his sleeve, even through the playoffs last year. He kept approaching it one game at a time, and I think that's how he'll do it this time. I think that's how he'll look at this district schedule.
All right, that is Michael Adam from the Austin American-Statesman. Thanks a lot, Michael. Now up next on the 6A schedule release show is Danny Mata from News 92 FM in Houston. Danny, let's talk a little bit of the 6A schedules here for the Houston area. What are some of the games that stick out to you the most when it comes to 6A in the Houston area?
Well, I think that one of the ones that sticks out to me is absolutely going to be Pearland versus Pearland Dawson. I mean, that's such an interesting situation with those schools. Manville makes the jump up to 5A before Dawson makes the jump, and Dawson's a bigger school. And I know the communities had tried to keep those schools separate. They like the fact that the communities supported each other, that the kids from Dawson supported Pearland and vice versa. And to see that those two teams now will square off head-to-head for the first time, and two pretty good football teams, Eric Wells, Tony Heath, they know each other very well. To me, that's a matchup I'm very intrigued by, mainly because of just how good those two teams are. A lot of people look at Pearland, they look at the loss of guys like Ryan Griswold, they look at the loss of guys like Justin Phillips, and they say, okay, well, Pearland's kind of in a rebuilding year. But what they don't realize is that team's bringing back most of the team that went to the state championship a year ago. So Pearland's still going to be pretty good. And then on the Dawson side, last year they struggled with consistency at the quarterback position, but we know about their ability to retool on defense. They're very deep. If they can get anything from the quarterback position, they can be very dangerous. This is a team that went to the regional championship game a year ago, despite the inconsistencies in the passing game. And I think that's obviously going to be a big key to them getting back to where they want to be. So the Pearland Dawson game in October, I think, is going to be a great game, not just from a football standpoint, but also for the impact it's going to have on that community. It's a nice introduction to a new rivalry.
Well, sticking to that area, sticking to the southern part of the Houston area, Friendswood moving up from 5A, from what was 4A to 5A, now it's 5A to 6A. They're going into, they've got the national rivalry with Clearbrook, who used to be in the district for a long time ago until they moved up, and then now here they are again. That rivalry is also renewed.
Yeah, it is. It'll be interesting to see how Brook's able to match up on their end. I remember a lot of the people that are on the Pearland Council that wanted basically to keep those two teams separated, the Dawson and Pearland, from being in the same classification. A lot of them have familiarity with what was going on at Friendswood and Clearbrook in that rivalry, and I think that they wanted that community support. But certainly I think that on the two ends of the spectrum, you're looking at Friendswood, a team that's going to contend for 6A. I know a lot of people in Friendswood were not thrilled about the fact that that team made the jump to 6A, but I look at the Friendswood Mustangs, and I think that team's going to win that district. I mean, because if you take a look at 24-6A, it's going to come down to, I believe, Clear Creek and Friendswood, and both of those teams are set up to succeed for not just this year, but next year as well. They're bringing back a lot of underclassmen, guys that are still going to be around next season as well. So with a lot of those players coming back and a lot of those players having time to improve and to develop, Friendswood and Clear Creek both have strong opportunities to make real strong runs, not just in the district, but into the postseason as well. So I think that Friendswood, they've got a shot to really contend for that district. Clearbrook, kind of in a rebuilding mode right now. I mean, they've struggled with consistently making the playoffs. I thought that a couple of years ago when they beat Fort Bend Austin in round one, that was one of the best teams that they had in a long time. They had a quarterback in Dominique Holmes, who really I thought was going to be the most improved player, or I thought was the most improved player in the city that I had seen that year at the quarterback position. But he tears his ACL in the middle of the season, and they kind of had to get by with Ramos as the backup. We'll see how he does in his senior year. Brook was pretty good last year. They were 4-1, then got hit by the injury bug. So if they can avoid injuries, I think that they have a chance to really compete here. But certainly going into the season, they're on the opposite end of the spectrum, and it looks like you could be looking at a situation where Friendswood could realistically win that district, and Clearbrook might be on the tail end of it.
You know, when it comes to schedules in the Houston area, one of the most attractive schedules, non-district-wise, is Lincoln Park and North Shore. And we talked to E.J. Holland from Dave Campbell Tech Football about this. Euless Trinity and Lincoln Park and North Shore face off in week 4, but that's not all. They've got Clear Spring, Manville, and then Spring Westfield also in that non-district slate. What's your take on Lincoln Park and North Shore and the way they scheduled for their non-district?
Boy, John Kay got himself a bit of a gift from David Amon, didn't he? I'm actually sitting next to David Amon during the realignment day, and Amon was trying to get in touch with Cibolo Steele and trying to arrange a matchup with them, but Steele had already had a commitment, I think with Soto, I think it's what it was, and they couldn't really break it, and so Amon starts calling around, and finally he gets a hold of Euless Trinity. They set up a date, and what a matchup that is. And then Coach Amon decides to step down. Now he's the AD, and John Kay is stuck with a messed up non-district schedule. With Clear Springs is the easiest of 4 teams that you're looking at. That just kind of gives you an idea of the kind of a schedule that you're looking at. This Clear Springs is absolutely no joke at all. North Shore really did a great job of challenging themselves, and it gets them prepared for what has always been one of the best districts that you'll see. And then they made it even tougher. Last year it was Cinco Ranch. They replaced Cinco Ranch with Westfield. Westfield, a team that a lot of people feel like it's their time to come out of Houston and maybe make a run at a state championship. Certainly, I think that's realistic. And then, of course, you've got Manville in week 2. With De'Ara King and the guys that they have out there at Manville, that's certainly going to be a dangerous squad. That team will probably win the district. That team's a state title contender. And then you're coming out in your final game and you're replacing Houston Madison with Euless Trinity. And we all know how good Euless Trinity is. So I certainly think that North Shore really challenging themselves the way they did is going to get them prepared. And really nothing new. And I think that's really kind of the way that it has to be done, because the more of a challenge you give yourself going into district play, I think the better prepared you are, especially when you're talking about, a district like 21-6A, and you got teams like Port Arthur Memorial, who I think is going to be really, really good this year. You got LaPorte, you got Westbrook, Deer Park, the same, it's always the usual suspects in that district. And I believe that getting themselves a schedule like this will really get them prepped. But we'll learn a lot about North Shore early on with a schedule like that. You're talking about, I think, they're facing 3 state title contenders in the first 4 weeks, starting with Manville and carrying on into Westfield and then the Euless Trinity. And I think that says a lot about what they're doing for themselves. And North Shore might be there too if they can get some consistency in the passing game, something that they really haven't had since Micah Thomas broke his hand a couple of years ago, and they really haven't been able to find a quarterback that could really move the ball downfield vertically. If they have the passing game solidified, I think North Shore is a state title contender again too, but we have to see if they can do that. Certainly they'll give themselves a challenge to see how they measure up.
Couple more questions for you here. Houston Lamar, they've turned into a state title contender again with the transfers over the off season. Your take on their schedule, opening up with Brenham and then having that tough schedule with Port Arthur Memorial and Elkins.
Yeah, I mean, what a schedule that is. I mean, Elkins, yes, a lower classification, but a team that's just coming out of the 5A level, so I don't know if they're really hurting as far as their football team goes. Elkins, I think, could very well win the state title in 5A. They bring back a lot of kids. The Port Arthur Memorial, always very tough. You talk about Brenham. Brenham's a state title contender. I mean, what a schedule that Lamar puts for themselves. And I looked at this going into the year, and I thought, Bel Air might have a chance to win this district, and maybe they do. But then Lamar went out and got themselves J.W. Ketchum, and that completely changes the entire spectrum of things. And then adding that running back and getting themselves into a position where now, as you said, they can compete again for a state title. And Lamar, they've really built a lot of momentum. I feel like I feel like a lot of these kids, and I think Coach Nolan's really going to have them focused on the task at hand. A year ago, I say this with all due respect to Pearland, they made a terrific run. Coach Heath just continues to prove he's an amazing coach. But Pearland was not the better team last year when they played Lamar. That was a Lamar team that, for whatever reason, I think they may have overlooked Pearland. I think a lot of teams overlooked Pearland and kind of got caught in that. But Lamar, to me, was the better team, and Lamar was the only team I thought out of Division I coming out of Houston that if they would have squared off with Allen, they could have realistically beaten them. They knew the kind of offense that Allen ran. They had seen Kyler Murray before. They were a couple of home run plays away from beating them the year before. I look at that team and I say to myself, okay, this is a team that's loaded with talent. They're really building something, and I think that they're just kind of on a roll right now. And when you look at that matchup, when you look at a Brenham who could win 5A, who could win the whole thing in 5A, look at Port Arthur Memorial, who if they come out of 21-6A district champs, who knows how far they could go. And that's the team that was in the state semis 3 years ago. And then you're looking at Elkins, that I just mentioned, they could win the state title in 5A. There are a lot of they're setting themselves up for a real strong run here. And if they can get through Bel Air, which history has shown they can get through Bel Air, then there's no reason to believe that Lamar can't do it all over again. And the question is going to be what it always is after you get through your district schedule, which outside of Bel Air they don't necessarily have strong competition in that district. Are they going to be ready for the postseason? And if the answer is yes, then Lamar has as good a chance as anyone to make a run.
And one of the most unpredictable districts in the state is 17-6A. As you probably are aware, the district out in San Antonio, 27-6A, gone to zone play with their 10 teams. How much did that hurt 17-6A without the zone play schedule and having only one non-district game?
I don't know, because I think a lot of those teams are used to it at this point. I don't think that you should be playing for a postseason spot in week 2. I think that's definitely. I think that you kind of need those games to get you prepared. You need those multiple non-district games to get you prepared for a run. And there's only going to be more schools. At some point, if they keep them all in the same group, you can end up with a very, very large district, and you could end up in a situation where you're playing for the playoffs in week 1. I certainly don't want to see that as a possibility. But I'll tell you, the one thing it does do is it puts teams like Cy-Fair into playoff mode immediately. So you're playing for your playoff lives, right away. So by the time the postseason arrives, you kind of been in that mode the entire season. And I think that it's no coincidence that those teams have been able to make strong runs because, for example, you take a look. You take a look at a Cy-Fair and a Cy-Woods that both have given Katy problems in the past when they've met early on in the playoffs. And I think a lot of that is just because they've been in playoff mode for so long. And Katy, you typically will kind of cruise through District 19, and it really, I don't know that they're necessarily prepared for a team that's basically been in battle mode all season long. It's always a fun district. It always creates some interesting situations. I remember we saw Cy Ridge was in there. A year ago we saw Cy Ranch. Cy Springs got in there early on. I mean, there's a lot of parity early, but I think that Cy-Fair is probably going to go ahead and win that district. They still have a strong defense. They've got Ross Donnelly, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the entire state. I truly believe that when you look at that Cy-Fair team, it's going to come down to their offense and how effective they're going to be. Now, they do get back a guy like Ja'Cory Aleem, who they lost to an ACL tear early last season. They had to rely on Dylan Burden. Getting Ja'Cory Aleem back, who's probably the more athletic of the two backs, is going to make them pretty dangerous. 17-6A, I think, is going to present a challenge because it always does. There's a lot of parity in that in that district. I think you'll see Cy Falls kind of come back up a little bit. I think Cy Wood's going to hang in there. Jersey Village should be pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out. But I certainly believe that 17-6A is entertaining, if nonetheless. Do I think teams should be playing for their playoff lives in week 2? No, but I do see how it can benefit them from time to time.
All right, that's Danny Mata from News 92 FM in Houston. Thanks a lot, Danny.